we are, and it's my entire family. We are taking ancestral and traditional approaches to food and merging them with modern culinary approaches to food to create a food system that is as nourishing, sustainable, and ethical as possible. And this all comes from archaeological and anthropological research, and then obviously modern culinary arts. And we're doing it in a couple of different ways. So we have the Eastern Shore Food Lab, which is our nonprofit, and the focus of that is anything that has to do with research, teaching, and outreach. And then we also have the Modern Stone Age Kitchen, which is where we make all of that come to life. We're producing the most nourishing food possible for the community. Well, ingredients are incredibly important, and they have been to us for not us, but people seeking health have been focused on ingredients for a very long time. And the question I've asked my entire life, and what really drives a lot of my research, and has for my entire career, is what should I be eating? What as a human should I be eating to be as healthy as possible? And what I've found out is that while that's an important question and one we're all asking, the most, or at least just as importantly, another question we should be asking is how should I be eating? Humans have one of the least efficient digestive tracts of any animal on the planet. And what we need to recognize is that most of the foods that we eat, we have absolutely no biological business eating. We're not designed to consume them. And that goes from meat to dairy as adults to grains. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't be eating them. The thing about humans that's different than other animals is that we do most of our processing. We overcome our biological limitations in our digestive tract by processing our food before we put it into our mouths. And we've been doing it at some level for almost 3.5 million years. So whether that means something simple like slicing, dicing, or chopping, or cooking, or fermenting, what we're doing is preparing that food to make it as safe and nourishing as possible before we put it into our mouths. So in the case of bread, we are not designed to eat grains at any level whatsoever. Grains, nuts, seeds, and legumes are actually some of the most dangerous parts of plants because they're designed to actually, with chemically and physically, to withstand our digestive tract and get deposited in a pile of manure somewhere else. But chemically, they are loaded with things like anti-nutrients, phytates, lectins, all sorts of things that are keeping them dormant and safe until they're in the right environment to reproduce. And those things are not very good for the human body. But what we can do is fool that seed, nut, grain, legume into thinking it's in the right place for it to sprout. It lets down its defenses, and it's safer for us to consume at that point. So one great way to do it, especially with grains, is through lactic fermentation. So the difference between, to answer your question directly, between a regular yeasted bread from the grocery store and the kind of a real true long fermented wild sourdough bread like what we do here is that a yeasted bread uses yeast to eat the sugars, carbohydrates, and produce carbon dioxide and alcohol. The alcohol gets burned off when it bakes. The yeast or the carbon dioxide makes the bread rise and get soft and fluffy. Well, in a sourdough fermentation, there's two things happening at the same time. One, yeast is doing that. So there are wild yeasts that are making the bread rise, but there's also lactobacillus bacteria that are transforming the grains into something that's safer and more nourishing for our bodies. Not only is it safer, but it's easier for us to access. Another thing that's a little bit more kind of touchy-feely, but still very important, is with today's approach to food that's just, you can eat this McDonald's hamburger in California and you can eat it in Tokyo and it tastes exactly the same. Or you can drink, Coca-Cola here and drink it here and it tastes exactly the same. And for some reason we kind of celebrate that. Food used to be incredibly regional. That's that term terroir that we use for wine, where Argentinian wine tastes different than French wine or Californian wine because of the growing conditions in the soil and the grapes and all these different things. We celebrate that. I love the fact that when food is made traditionally, we can also celebrate that sense of terroir, even if it's the same ingredients. So when we harness the wild bacteria and yeast that are in the air, on our skin, on the grains that are local to here, the bread that we produce has some nuances here in Chestertown that are different than they are in Paris or San Francisco or anywhere else a sourdough bread is being made. And that's fantastic. I mean, here, this is Chestertown sourdough bread, and you can't make it anywhere else. But the reason we went and they're amazing. There were some fantastic experimental archaeologists at University College Dublin, which is where I was a visiting professor at the time, that are working on answering questions about historic foodways, and it's really in a different way trying to get at some of the same information. The reason we went, however, was we were based out of Ireland for the year, but we traveled to, I think, about 17 different countries to live and work with indigenous and traditional groups. And what we wanted to experience and learn and document were unique things, unique traditional approaches to food that they were still using to nourish themselves. And then come back and figure out ways to, again, like I mentioned in the beginning of this, to combine it with modern approaches to food to create a really cool food system. What's important, I think, and something that I've learned over a very long period of time, I've been so focused on looking at ancestral diets and the diets that literally built us as humans, that I was missing something key. There was so I don't know exactly. Nobody knows what the diet was 300,000 years ago when modern day Homo sapiens first appeared. And if we did know what that was, and first of all, it wouldn't be one diet. We were in a lot of different places at the time as humans around the world. But if we knew exactly what that diet was, I could probably make a convincing argument that that diet would still be the best diet to biologically nourish you right now. I mean, we are essentially in the same bodies. I know there's a lot of external factors, but we are essentially in the same bodies with the same digestive tract and the same, root nutrient needs, right? We still have to support this body and these brains. The problem is, we as humans nourish ourselves with food in two very important ways. One is biological and one is sort of emotional and cultural, right? So in order to be truly nourished, it's not just making sure I have the right protein and the right magnesium and the right whatever in my body. It's making sure that I as a human am experiencing that food the way I should be experiencing. And that has everything to do with who you're eating with, how you're eating, but also our expectations of taste and aroma and texture and presentation, right? And those things change rapidly. Even though our biological needs are essentially the same, our emotional and cultural needs are incredibly different now than they were 500 years ago, and certainly 5,000, 50,000. One thing I'd love somehow to get across, too, that I think is very important about what we do here is we have very strong stances on certain things. And one is we have a strong stance against any refined sugar. So we use absolutely no refined sugars whatsoever. We use maple syrup, high-quality honey, and completely unrefined sugar like muscovado. We have a strong stance against industrial nut and seed oils. So you will never find any industrial nut and seed oils in here whatsoever. And then finally, any approach to food, anything that we're doing to food is towards the final goal of making it safer and more nourishing for our human bodies. And for more nourishing, what I mean is it's the nutrients are as nutrient dense as possible and they're as bioavailable as possible. So our bodies can actually access the nutrients that are in there. And what we're striving for as well, and we're doing it really, really well, is because the process of preparing the food is so crucial to what we're doing here, we want to have complete control over that process. So what we strive to do, and we're really close to it, is there are no two ingredients getting put together for any of our food anywhere outside of these walls. It's all happening inside. So we're making our cheese, we're making the final end of certain butters, any of the meats on our pizzas we're making in-house. We're doing all the pepperoni, all the sausage, all the sourdough, all of that. So I think that's something that's a little bit different about what we're doing, but I think I'm confident that the food that's coming out is as safe and nourishing as possible.